Hi, this is Steve Rigolosi, and tonight on Forgotten Mysteries, we're going to try something a little different. I'm going to give you a twofer. I'm going to review two books here in a little bit briefer detail than I usually do because I think I could get 10 minutes out of each book, but not 20. And then I will close with a recommendation for an author I really like who is still alive. I don't usually get into recommending or not recommending writers who are still on this mortal coil, but if I can help a writer I really like sell a few more books, I definitely would consider that part of my mission. So without further ado, let's go. I'll start out with the book that I think will be more likely to be recognized, or at least the author, and then I'll go into this other book second. So the first one is The Case of the Kidnapped Angel, and this is by Evie Cunningham. It's copyright 1982 by Delacorte, and as you can see at the top there, it is a Masao Masuto mystery. So interesting thing about this book is I had heard of Cunningham, in mystery circles. I had not read him before. I know if it was a he or she. And, doing research for this channel, I come to discover that it is a pseudonym of Howard Fast. Howard Fast was a staple in my house growing up. My mother and father were always reading Howard Fast books. And, I guess he never really appealed to me at that time. Those sort of, I guess they were sort of like family sagas or that sort of thing. I never picked one up. So it was interesting to me to the idea of, okay, here's yet another well-established writer who decides he wants to write mysteries and proceeds to do so under a pseudonym. And, Howard Fast was one of these writers who just has this amazing level of output, right? Who just wrote and wrote and wrote and has dozens and dozens of books. Sort of amazing, a true writer who can just keep his creativity high and and generate that kind of output is sort of amazing to me. The books that I've written myself, I go through 10, 12 drafts. They take me years to write, and so I can't imagine writing at that sort of pace. But anyway, let's get into the book. So this book stars a Japanese-American detective named Masao Masuto, and he is based out of Beverly Hills, California. He is what they call a nisei. The term's explained in the book. He is the son of Japanese parents who came to this country from Japan. So basically, he's sort of like first generation Japanese American. And his claim to fame, in addition to being on the Beverly Hills Police Force, is that he is a Zen Buddhist. And I was looking forward to learning a little bit more about Zen Buddhism because I know a little bit about it, but not a lot. And I was looking forward to seeing how it would get interwoven throughout the pages of this book. So what I'll say about this book is it starts one way and ends in a very different way. What you think you're getting when you read the first three chapters ends up being not really all that representative of the entire book. So just the quick plot summary is that the wife of a huge Hollywood star, whose name is Angel, hence the title, The Case of the Kidnapped Angel. She is kidnapped, held for ransom, $1 million. The husband is absolutely adamant that he will not get the police involved because, of course, the kidnappers have said, if we even get a whiff of the police, your wife is dead. So he makes the drop himself and finds himself murdered after the money is turned over. And then there are a couple of more murders that also take place in the book. So this is one of those books where bodies drop every 50 or 60 pages or so. And that can be okay. I mean, I don't need that, but it can help to move the plot along, and I'm fine with it. So when I started the book, it felt very pleasant to me. Like maybe I was expecting that because of the Zen Buddhist angle. And I really liked Masuto's approach to the world. He has a rose garden. He can't afford to live in Beverly Hills. Who can? He lives in Culver City in a little house where he's got a little tiny meditation area of his house and a rose garden. He loves to garden. And a nice family, a wife and 2 children. So he's a family guy and also a very dedicated police officer. And he gets called in to investigate, this kidnapping and then murder. And at the beginning, it feels like a gentle book, a Zen book, where you're expecting nothing too hard-boiled or nothing too really crazy or violent to happen, and that is the case for the first few chapters. But things get a little or a lot more hard-boiled as you move into the book. Masuto is very much convinced, right from the beginning, that he knows who did each of the murders. And I found that slightly off-putting in that I think that by chapter 3, you really can't announce that you know for sure who did it, right? You might have your strong hunches, but by page 30 or 40, you really can't know who it is unless you've seen it happen, right? But Masuto speaks with utter confidence that he knows who did it and how it happened, and but he's not going to tell anybody until he gathers enough evidence to support his own belief. So I kind of like a detective whose thought process I can follow as I read through the book, but I was willing to accept it here because I really found the writing quite delightful and light in a good way and sprightly. And I also liked the way the author handled the kind of 2 different approaches to Beverly Hills. One, which Masuto brings to the plot, is as a Zen Buddhist, he is so aware of the beauty of his surroundings. And of course, Beverly Hills is beautiful. And it also takes place in Malibu. And Malibu is this, oceanfront town in California, like ultra wealthy. You got to be a gazillionaire to live there. And so there's a lot of natural beauty that he can really appreciate. Even if this beauty comes because trillionaires have the money to spend on crafting nature to their own particular taste and building these beautiful homes that are, straight out of Architectural Digest, there's a nice sense of the beauty of the region. And it's contrasted, of course, with the kind of greed and acquisitiveness and snobbery of the wealthy who live in these places, who it's almost like they couldn't care less about the beauty, but all they care about is the social status. So it was, and the attitudes on these people, these rich people forever threatening to sue. Don't you know who I am? I live in the biggest house in Beverly Hills. I'll have your career. I'll have your head on a plate. Constantly threatening because they think that they are, God's gift to humanity just because they're super wealthy, and many of them are in the film industry, but not all of them. And so you've got that, what seems to me to be pretty realistic interaction between the police, who are just trying to do their job, and then these snooty residents who think that money gives them the right to say and do anything that they want. And that's a little bit more what one would expect in fiction, right? That kind of the underbelly of the beauty of these towns. But Cunningham really nicely balances how, you know, two places can be viewed through two completely different lenses, and I really like that. So for the first half of the book, I was following along and really tickled because I was really enjoying it. And then something happened where the level of profanity really got notched up, almost as if an editor said to Cunningham, "You're not using the words shit and fuck enough in this book, so please add them copiously." And you know, we all have our beliefs about the role of profanity in fiction. The older I get, the more I really find it unnecessary and often gratuitous. Here and there, okay. And there are some writers who use profanity extremely well, like Elmore Leonard. But here it seemed like these four-letter words were being dropped into the conversation regularly. And frankly, I kind of found that a turnoff, despite being a person who curses, right? I have been known to let fly with long sentences composed completely of profanity. But I don't really like it in my fiction so much. And all that profanity really kind of did turn me off. Another thing that I kind of upset me was the level of racism in this book. In that, you know, Masuto is of Japanese heritage, but people are constantly calling him a chink, or referring, or like sort of mocking his heritage. And I mean, come on, this is 1982. We knew better by that point than to kind of sort of allow this or propagate this or to put this out into the world. You know, I always say on this channel, when we're reading books from the 30s and 40s, we have to understand that they were a product of the time in which they were written. But there is like a little too much for my taste in this book, just because, like I said, it was written in the 80s. And I think Cunningham should have known better. There's a servant, a housemaid in the main house that is featured in this book. And she's almost never called by name. She's known as the little black girl or the little black girlie or whatever. It just struck me as kind of dismissive, you know, removing her identity and just identifying her by her race and gender. I was like, wow. And again, like you see more of that in, you know, the early books of the 20th century, but here I couldn't get down with it. And I had to make a comparison to the Charlie Chan books, right, which were published 50 years earlier, in which the author shows utter respect for Charlie Chan and his heritage and his characters. There are some things about the way he writes in terms of basically transliterating Chinese English into English, the Chinese language into the English language that sounds a little, I don't know, broken or stereotypical. But the author of the Charlie Chan books, Earl Durr Biggers, had nothing but respect for his characters. And here I felt that Cunningham was, I don't know, it was borderline for me. It really was. And then there is quite a surprise in this book. And, you know, we all like surprises. And I wish I could tell you what it is, but I can't because it would be a spoiler. But I know that today it would really raise some eyebrows, and not in a good way, because it is another stereotypical portrait of a group, let's say, that relies on really, really negative stereotypes. So in the course of a brief 180 pages, it went from something really light and pleasant into something a lot darker and um, kind of unpleasant, with a lot of meanness and negativity. And so I don't really know what more to say about the book. Um, I I like I like the first half so much that I don't want to discount Evie Cunningham in the future, because I will read more. I think you definitely have to give an author more chance than one. But I just was, like I said, surprised at some of the things that happened in here, and I could really understand why modern readers would get their nose put out of joint. I tend to be a little bit more tolerant of that kind of stuff, um, not because I agree with it, but just because, again, these are books published, 40 years ago now, not today. But it was a little too much even for me. I will close by saying, though, that I'm really happy and I'm really approve of the fact that they used two P's in kidnapped, right? The case of the kidnapped angel. I hate when I see kidnapped with just one P. And it's totally acceptable in English to use just one P. Doesn't make sense to me. I read it as kidnapped. I mean, it should be, by all the normal rules of English, it should be kidnapped with two P's. So editorially, I was happy with that decision on the part of the publisher. And so I'll close on that positive note. So book number 2 for today is Death on the Reserve by Josephine Bell. This is copyright 1966 by Macmillan and their Cock Robin mystery imprint, which you can see down there at the bottom. And Macmillan published some really good mysteries back in the day, including those by Josephine Tay. Josephine Bell has an interesting history. She was a physician, a licensed physician, an English woman, who, after writing a few successful books, basically gave up her practice to write full time. Her real name was Doris Bell Collier, and she used the pseudonym Josephine Bell for her books. And what I can tell you about her oeuvre is that they seem to fall kind of into two categories. One of traditional English mysteries and one more, almost more like Simenon, like more psychological thrillers. I mean, thriller seems like kind of a strong word, but let's call it just a psychological novel. And so the first book I had read by Bell was a psychological novel, and I thought it was okay, but the three main, it was called The Catalyst, and the three main characters all hated each other's guts. They're traveling in the Aegean, and they all just hate each other. And so while I found her to be a good writer, it was so unpleasant to spend time around people who despise each other that I thought, well, I'm not going to read another Josephine Bell anytime soon. I need a little light. Like, give me some light, baby. But when I saw this and other Bell books in used bookstores, and I realized that she also wrote in a different mode, I thought, okay, Steve, be open-minded, try her again. And so I did. And I have to say, I enjoyed Death on the Reserve. It is a traditional English mystery, but Bell was really, really good with setting. This takes place in a wildlife preserve called Faldmere, in the northwest corner of Great Britain. And the main plot is that somebody goes missing and is presumed dead. The lead character, the investigator, is Dr. Frost, older man, about 70, and he and his wife are going up to visit their daughter, who is renting a cottage out there on the outskirts with her husband, who's a novelist. And so the family gets together up there in the hinterland of Great Britain, and they're a nice family. They get along. They enjoy each other's company. They do things like cook together and go hiking together. And I don't know. I'm kind of a sucker for families that get along and people who like each other. Dr. Frost's son-in-law, Julian, the novelist, he's a little persnickety, a little snotty, a little high-strung. I love him so much, but not everybody can be wonderful. And as the book progresses, it really just becomes a traditional English mystery, figuring out where, did this person who's missing, did he die? Was he killed? Did he disappear of his own accord? What are the circumstances? There's kind of an interesting smuggling subplot here, which is made possible by the geography of the landscape there. And there's a lighthouse with a lighthouse keeper, and then there's, of course, it being English, there's a lot of attention to the flowers, the local flora, the local fauna, and beautiful descriptions of the landscape. And a very solid mystery that the book is, I think, 190 pages, and it all just moves along very nicely. Dr. Frost is a pleasant character. Not like he's over the head. You don't think, wow, this man has really made an impression on me. But you do like him. You like his ways. He's married to sort of a no-nonsense Scottish wife who reminded me a bit of, what was her name? Mrs. Carson's wife on Downton Abbey. Mrs. Carson. I can't remember her name before she married him. Mrs. Hughes. She reminded me a bit of Mrs. Hughes. She could always be counted on to put in sort of a reality-inducing statement every now and again to kind of keep people on the straight and narrow. And I really liked her. And she and her husband and children have a good relationship. And so I enjoyed it. I think Josephine Bell's a good writer. Maybe a little stiff. The prose could be a little bit stiff. But there are some really good lines in here. And I specifically remembered page 45 because I want to read this one to you. So how's this for some really good writing? She writes here, Mrs. Anderson delivered this with great self-satisfaction. The inspector wondered, not for the first time, where you drew the line between forbearing non-interference, selfish lack of interest, and real criminal neglect. And that's talking about parents and their ways of dealing with their children, right? Are they permissive? Are they overly authoritarian? When does permissiveness kind of cross the line into neglect of children? And there are a lot of lines like that show that Bell was a good observer. She also, you sense her more conservative social beliefs in this book, right? She's for law and order and children not being allowed to be juvenile delinquents, and she's kind of a straight and narrow kind of gal that way. But I thought she told a really nice story. I enjoyed the setting a lot. It was maybe a little too much. It was maybe a little too much description. And in fact, this was one of those books where I really felt like I wish I had had a map of the reserve and the surrounding geography, because it's complicated. There's inlets and brackish water and salt water and fresh water and precipices that disappear and shingles or beaches that are sometimes there and sometimes not, that sometimes give access to caves and sometimes don't. It's a little complicated. If you read this book, I can just kind of put your mind at ease, I hope, by saying that it doesn't really play a major role in the plot. A little bit it does, but in a way that you can understand. So if you're not getting some of the details of the geography, don't worry too much about it. But like I said, I really wish there had been a map in here, and there was not. So I would like to recommend that you give Josephine Bell a try if this sounds like your cup of tea. She really does seem to be forgotten for the most part, and that's a shame, because I will read more of her books when I'm looking for something traditionally English. Good storyteller, good writer, observant, good plotter, that all the pieces, all the dangling strands come together nicely in the end, which is a hallmark of a good mystery in my opinion. And so, yes, check out Josephine Bell. The book under discussion here is Death on the Reserve. I like the cover design a lot. I love that blue, I guess it's a pigeon or a dove, there. I just like how that little bit of blue pops among the black and white of the cover. It's really just really nice. I like that, the way the cover designer used color there. Okay, so now with that said, I'm going to do something which I rarely do, and that is recommend an author who is still alive and still writing, has a very strong output. And I have always liked him. I always have. And each time, like, I had read some clunky books, which, I won't bother to review. But I was feeling like, God, I need something that I know I'm really going to enjoy. And I have my go-to people for that, like Andrew Garve and Bill Ballinger. And this other gentleman that I'm about to speak about, and his name is Simon Brett. And he writes a bunch of series. This one here is a Charles Paris mystery. It's called The Comedian Dies. And Charles Paris is kind of a washed up, middle-aged actor who, is forever kind of on the fringes of just trying to get enough job to keep a roof over his head. He lives in a studio apartment, what they call a bedsitter in the UK, and, gets himself involved in crimes. But the thing about Simon Brett is he is so witty and so funny and so observant. He really can get into a parody of theater people and film people and television people, and he just does it with such a perfect touch. Reading every line of a Simon Brett book is just a pleasure for me. I'm tickled all along. I love his touch with writing. It's light. It's never show-offy. It's never, look how funny I am. He just is funny. The wit is just so much a part of the writing, and it seems to come so naturally to him. I mean, what a gift. I'm truly, truly envious. So if you have never read Simon Brett, check out a couple of his series. You can begin with Charles Paris. Comedian Dies is really a fine book to start with. But ask around. I think you'll find that he's got a lot of fans, and for very good reason. And so I'm just tipping the hat that I am not wearing to Simon Brett as someone who gave me a couple nights of really enjoyable reading, which I needed after reading those clunky books. Okay, that's what I've got for you tonight. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will be back next time.